Hello, this is Mike and Jenny again. We're here speaking to the students of the Social Media and Psychology course. And we have some questions that we were going to answer from our presentation that was done last Tuesday. So I think what we're just going to do is read the questions, jump right in. We don't have, this is not scripted. We don't have pre-programmed answers for this. So we figured we just kind of do it just like we would if this was a question and answer right there in class. Sorry we didn't have time for more of that, and I wish we could have come back that Thursday, but it's just not able to do so with work and everything. But hopefully this is the next best thing, and we can get your questions answered. If you have more questions, just pass them on to the professor, and we'll get them taken care of for you. So question number one. Of course, this is dealing with Jehovah's Witnesses. That's what the presentation that we did was about. So the question is, what are people in it like? Are they really depressed? Yes, they're very depressed. It's very difficult to live a life where you have to tamp down so many natural emotions and just biological responses, and where you have to be kind of segregated from everybody else or isolated, where you can't have friends in the evil world, and where you can't, your only friends can be within the congregation, and you may not even have people your age in the congregation. There's so much expected of you. Jehovah's Witnesses like to talk about how they're, quote, Jehovah's happy people, which is almost a sign that they're not really happy. If you have to proclaim it that much, you're not that happy. And it's just there's a talk that was given by a brother Mac years ago, and it was passed around many of the congregations on a CD. And brother Mac, he's a well-known speaker. He travels and goes to different areas, and he used to talk about, brothers and sisters, we're just living on pills and prayers, and it's kind of true. Like, there's nothing wrong. I don't want to promote depression there, but depression is a naturally occurring thing. But depression and anxiety, a lot of OCD, cutting, a lot of eating disorders. There are a lot of things. There's a lot of abuse of prescription medication. These are people that need an outlet, or they have physical manifestations of psychological issues, even ticking. And we knew somebody that had seizures really bad and went to the Mayo Clinic, and they were diagnosed with pseudo seizures, most likely a physical reaction, a physical manifestation of a psychological condition. When you're living in an environment that's so controlled, you get out of control in some way. And when you live a life that is inauthentic, depression is a natural result of that. You're not living your life. You're not being true to yourself. I don't know. Do you have anything to add? I mean, there were just so many people that we knew that were, I don't know, it just seemed like everybody was on depression medication, or were taking, there's a lot of medical establishment sentiments that are expressed, and there are
lots of allergies.
Like allergies to
Everything.
perfumes, and just like, I don't
knew
know.
multiple people who would wear air purifiers around their neck because they couldn't be in the environments they were in.
Yeah, so you had that, lots of just when I was talking about pseudo or alternative medicine things, like there were a lot of people living on supplements, a lot of people living on special diets, a lot of people going to Tennessee from here because there was some witness down there that was a doctor, I assume, that had some sort of special machine that she would hook people up to. There's a lot of belief in things like iridology, and there were a lot of people I knew that went to flea market doctors.
Yeah.
And I'm not kidding.
I wish I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah, they would go to the flea market, and there were people who were selling, some miracle cure or whatever, and they would buy into that stuff. Sadly, there's a lot of people, because of the anti-medical establishment, who aren't getting proper treatment for things like cancers and things like that.
Yeah.
I mean, I could go on and on. A lot of yeah, I could go on and on. I'm going to spare you.
It makes me think of my friend. We had a pretty good friend when we were leaving, and I would have some long conversations with her, usually while Mike was fixing her computer for her. But I would have long conversations with her about her depression, and between her and I talking about some of the healthier things that I was learning, she would often leave those conversations feeling better about herself. She wouldn't speak so hatefully of herself. She would smile more, and she actually seemed to have a little bit of hope. And then she would go back to the meetings that we attended, and she would listen to the information that was presented, and she would go right back into the self-hating talk and the depression and the hopelessness of the future. And I that was a pretty big turning point, as we were leaving, just realizing how, it is this atmosphere that's really bringing her down so badly.
And that brings me to perfectionism. There is an absolute epidemic of perfectionism in the organization. The black and white thinking, they're very rigid, and there's a lot of self-hating talk, internal dialogues or monologues. Perfectionism runs absolutely rampant because everyone is trying to be better and better and better so that they can maybe someday be good enough to gain salvation. There's an epidemic, among people who leave Jehovah's Witnesses. One of the themes you hear is never feeling like they were good enough, and that's because of the perfectionism. And a lot of people, myself included, I am a recovering perfectionist. I will be, just like an alcoholic is always an alcoholic their whole life, even if they're in recovery. I will always be a recovering perfectionist. I have to battle certain things that I do in my head, certain expectations that I have of myself, and that is absolutely from growing up in the cult. Absolutely. I might be predisposed to it in other ways. There's even some genetic links to it from research I've done, but absolutely it is emphasized within the cult. So people are not happy, and there's a lot of depression. The next question, this is kind of a multi-part thing. How did Jenny come out of it? Did she argue with you? Was she reluctant? Did she ever think of turning you in? Especially given that she was a woman in that role, where did she get the strength and confidence to leave? Must have been hard. Was she scared? Did she think it was hard? So we've kind of talked about it. And I think what we're going to do is just kind of talk about the process of leaving to some extent. We're going to cut it down as much as we can. If you want to hear more, one of the episodes of this JW Life, the first podcast I did, actually deals with a lot of me coming out of the organization, waking up. And I'm the one who started waking up, which is why the question is how it was for Jenny. We'll start with what touched it all off was me getting suicidal in 2008 because I couldn't live up to this life, the standard that was expected of me as a brother, the pressure, the perfectionistic self-talk, it was just, everything was negative. Nobody understood me. I couldn't quite fit in. I wasn't making a lot of friends in the organization because it's very cliquey. So I started reading books so first of all, I learned that I probably have ADHD, and learning that there is such a thing as an executive function disorder, a disorder where you literally can't follow through with everything that you want to do. That was huge for me because that's the antithesis of perfectionism, which is I'm going to force whatever it is to happen. ADHD taught me that, I can't do that, and that people have limitations, and that there are chemical and genetic reasons that people behave like they do. And that there's more to it. It's not all about control. And it was a very controlling environment that we grew up in. So just through getting healthy, reading books on narcissism, the organization is completely narcissistic, completely in love with itself, cannot perspective take. And so in the process of me getting healthier as a person, we were both reading all of these books. And so we were both getting healthier. We didn't know that that would lead us out. Just like I'm sure if there was a spouse of someone who is getting, physically abused by their husband or their wife, if they went to counseling or something because they couldn't handle all of the negative baggage they were carrying, it might lead them out of that relationship. Well, this was leading us out. It was part of it, a big part of it. There's never any one thing necessarily. It's usually an amalgam of things that get you out. It's a shelf that you keep piling things on until it breaks. And so I started that process of getting healthier emotionally and mentally. She came along for the ride. And then I started investigating the organization and learning some things there. I was talking about it openly. And then, how did you kind of take it from there?
Yeah, I loved what I was learning. He's always been the one in our relationship who does things, who starts things. He's the go-getter. I'm the more relaxed person. And I loved learning all of this healthier stuff. There was a point in time where we were actually not attending all of the meetings, and I was listening to the Bible myself on my headphones while we were at work. And as I was listening to the Bible, there were parts of it that really disturbed me, and parts of it that I didn't feel like fit together. And so that shook me, and I was trying to kind of work through that on my own. I talked to him a little bit, but he was like, that's out there.
Yeah, I wasn't ready to. I would discuss how bad the organization was all day, or the ploys that were used and things like that. But I wasn't ready to look at the Bible yet. I was a firm believer. So
yeah. So my own, my doubts were really more theocracy based. And so I would look at those things, and I wasn't sure how it fit together, and I really didn't feel like, I kind of think I settled on, there isn't a solid answer, but I'm just going to stay here until I figure it out. And he was more about the organizational things, and the more he talked about the organizational issues, he finally got me to talk about them with him, which as soon as I was able to kind of open that door, it was like I was ready to run out of it. I was fine. I was like, let's go, let's leave, let's not do this anymore. And it was a freeing feeling.
So let's talk about some of the specifics in the question.
Yeah.
Did you argue? Did we argue about it a lot? And I don't really think we argued.
No.
I would have my say. We would go to a meeting and the brother would say something hateful about worldly people on the platform. Yeah. Usually just something very unloving toward people on the outside. And at that point, I was seeing that the people on the outside were at least as good, if not better people than the people on the inside of the cult. So, we would leave and I'd discuss that. I'd have my soliloquy, yes. My monologue on the way home, yes. After the meeting, where I just had to let it out because I was so frustrated. And, but we didn't really argue,
No, I wanted you to be able to vent your feelings.
Yeah.
I wanted you to be able to talk it through. I was like, he'll figure this out. You just got to give you enough space, and it kind of didn't happen that way. You can't figure your way out of something like that.
Yeah, and so we didn't really argue. I wouldn't say at all. No. You allowed me to be where I was.
Yeah.
I think had you challenged me, we probably would have argued because I was seeing things and emotions were high as we were going through that. Were you reluctant? Yes.
For sure. I was super reluctant for a very long time. I fought the ideas that you were presenting to me for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, what was a long time? I mean, really, maybe a year at the most. I mean, really, because there are people who...
That's true.
There are people who spend years and years and years working on a spouse that either never comes out of the cult
Yeah.
or that eventually does. So it really wasn't that long. I mean, a year or less. Did you ever think of turning me in?
I didn't consider it even for a second. I always knew from day one that I liked you more than I liked the religion. I was worried about that because I knew that's not what the religion told me to do.
Yeah, you're not supposed to do that.
But that's how I felt. And I mean, I couldn't deny it. So,
Where did you get the strength and confidence to leave?
it's an interesting thing because people have often told me how strong I was and brave for leaving. The way that it happened for me, the way it felt for me, was like that was the only option. I saw that this thing that I was trying to make work wasn't working. My husband was already, for sure, finding it not working. It was hurting him at least as much, if not more, as it was me. And this other way of looking at things, this healthier life, this freedom that was in front of us, I just saw no other option than to go for that.
Um, so I guess that goes to, were you scared? We kind of talked about this earlier. I mean,
Yeah.
you just kind of, the way you just kind of talked, you weren't really scared, but there was an instance. So we had decided that we were going to disassociate. And so we wrote our letters, our official letters of disassociation to the congregation. And it was supposed to be mailed out one day.
Yeah.
And I gave them to her and she had them already. And the next day she didn't put them in the mail. And I noticed that. And so we talked about that because, she just, when you sit down and you have to write, because we didn't just write disassociation letters to the congregation to say that we didn't want to be Jehovah's Witnesses anymore. We also wrote goodbye letters to our families. And when you sit down to write that out and just all the feelings come up, it took her a day for those feelings to come down.
Yeah, that was the hard part.
Yeah, that was the hard part. Just there's a finality to it. You can't unring that bell. It's putting a bullet in everything that you've ever known. But it needed to be done as well. And so, we took that stand and we took it together. But yeah, there was at least a day where you were tripping a little bit.
I was. I never really doubted that it was the right thing to do. I was just like, I need a minute.
Yeah. Did you think it was hard? I mean, that kind of
Yeah,
goes along with the rest of that.
it was absolutely hard.
How did we end up being atheist? Was it a slow transition or abrupt? All right, so the atheism thing. So when we first left, when we wrote our disassociation letters in September of 2015, and we were officially no longer Jehovah's Witnesses, the honest truth, I still believe they had the truth. I did not want to be labeled one of Jehovah's Witnesses. I did not like the organization. I thought they were corrupt at best. But at the time, so although I had done all this work to break down the emotional dysfunction and the narcissism in the organization and the way the organization was run and just so many things that I saw, their outlook on people on the outside, who they were as people and the culture inside the cult. Although I had looked at that and broken it all down, I had not broken down the doctrine. So, and I was a true blue believer, fully immersed in all that. So it took me about 6 months after we officially left to break down all of the doctrine. Maybe not six, let's just say within 6 months I was an atheist. So I had to break down the doctrine of Jehovah's Witnesses. And then once I did, so she had been telling me the whole time how bad the Old Testament or the Hebrew scriptures as Jehovah's Witnesses have to refer to it to be different. They would tell us, or we would talk about that part of the Bible. And so I've never been a big history person. Just kind of don't care. More, I guess, future focused. And she kept telling me about all these stories, and I didn't remember a lot of the Bible stories. I guess maybe I hadn't been through the Bible storybook as a kid, so it didn't really resonate with me. But I started investigating the Bible. I said, look, everything that I believed was a lie. And now I have to look at the book that all of this was based on. And I started doing research. And just research, just things like how the Hebrew language didn't have vowels and it didn't have punctuation, and just how you can change the meaning of an entire sentence or paragraph by where you place a comma. I started looking at just all the different translations and how many differ from one another, and whether the tetragrammaton was used in the New Testament versus the Old Testament. And then you start learning about these different gods that were actually referenced in the Bible. And then I started just things like, Genesis right off the bat. You have Adam and Eve being kicked out of the garden, and there's a angel with the flaming sword. Well, swords weren't invented then, if you believe the biblical narrative. There were no swords. So did God introduce swords? Did he introduce weaponry? Like what? And if you start looking at the fossil record and evolution and things like that, there's no Adam and Eve 6,000 years ago. And if there's no because humans have been around longer than that. And if there's no Adam and Eve, then there's no original sin. Then there's no need for a redeemer, and it all starts falling apart. So I could go on and on. I mean, just the science of the Noah story and how it falls apart. There are all the contradictions in the Bible. So all of that started to fall apart. So I get to the end of that, and I'm like, all right. The same things that I used against the organization's doctrines, which was I started looking for evidence. I want to live an evidence-based life. I don't want to be lied to anymore. I started applying that to the Bible. And okay, there's a lot of evidence that the book doesn't add up. Not as it was said to me. Now, some may call it allegory. You can look at the Bible in lots of different ways, but that was the book that I had always believed in. And so I started wondering, what about other holy books? And you just go down this rabbit hole, and I can't rest my hope in something that doesn't have solid proof anymore. Not anything that, faith in the Bible, the definition of it is faith is the assured expectation of things, the evident demonstration of realities though not beheld. And the word evident is in there. And I want evidence, and I don't see evidence. I would have to convince myself of a lot of things. I would have to go beyond Occam's razor and try to figure out a lot of different ways to make a thing be in order to put that faith into it, and I can't do that. I understand that others do. I understand that for other people, this holds out something to them, but it doesn't for me. And could there, in my view, could there be a God? Why not? I can't disprove that there's not one. Could there be many gods? Sure, why not? Could God be a Smurf? Why not? Like, I don't know. So I can't say definitively that there's not. But atheism is just without theism. I'm not a theist. I can't be a theist. And if other people are, that's wonderful, and I support them in that. But it's not for me. And we talked earlier about this,
Yeah.
Kind of where you were. You just kind of let it all go.
Yeah, I remember after we had disassociated, and I remember looking at the Bible and just like remembering all the things that I had studied before and seen that I was uncomfortable with. And I just said to myself, like, I don't know if this is real or not, but I know that this guy is not somebody that I personally want to worship. That's where I kind of landed. And then you brought a lot of the things you were learning to me and studying, and you talked to me about them. Some of them I had actually looked at myself. Most of them I hadn't, and I mean, it's so interesting. We listened to a lot of books and a lot of podcasts and stuff about it. And just as time went on, I allowed my belief to just kind of evolve into what it is today.
Really, you just let it go.
I did.
As we talked about earlier, she just let it go. She just when
Yeah.
she was able to let go. I wasn't. I was clutching onto it, and I had to work through it. And it really was an eye opener to look at all of the stories that she had told me about, and to see how many people died at the hands of God in the Bible, and how many women were raped, and how children were basically fodder for wars and killed, and it was just so much violence, and for what? So I can't love that God if that God is going to destroy me at the end of the world or in whatever scenario. That's fine. He doesn't deserve my love because he's an awful father as I see it. And I'm not going to be ruled by fear. I'm not going to go into another authoritarian relationship. We were already in one authoritarian relationship, not doing that again. So I think the final question, as I'm trying to pull it up on my phone, was, are you happier now? Yeah, that's easy. Yes, very, very, very much happier. Um, I mean, we have friends now. We're just free. Like what price can you put on freedom? Being atheist now, life has meaning. This life has meaning. Not some future life that's promised, but this life is all we have. And because of that, every day is imbued with more meaning. When we look at the things around us, animals and things like that, people act like if you learn about evolution, then you lose the magic of the supposed creation around you. No, the fact that all these things came about like that, that's awesome. That's mad. Like, that's beautiful. And if I was to believe a God created it all, then I mean, yeah, that's nice, and all. But I also have to believe that he created, the parasites that bury themselves into other creatures and eat them from the inside out, and all of these horrible diseases and just all this other stuff. So I can't do that anymore. So now I just see it for what it is. It's just this thing that evolved, and it's amazing. Even looking at some of the awful things that have evolved, it's still amazing.
Yeah.
And
We don't have to moralize it.
yeah, we don't have to moralize stuff. Our life is our own. We are good people because we want to be. We're not good people because we fear some retribution from an angry God. We have so many more friends now than we ever had as Jehovah's Witnesses. The friends that we have now don't expect us to be exactly like them. I have friends that are staunch Republicans. I have friends that are staunch, the most liberal Democrats that you could imagine. I have friends that are of diverse sexualities.
Friends who can travel the world because they have lots of money, and friends who can barely, make it to work because they have almost none. We have
friends of all different socioeconomic backgrounds and ethnic backgrounds. That, like, we're not limited to the people that are around us in a cult anymore. And because of that, we have far more opportunities to grow and learn as people. We're not stuck so small. It's just life is, I mean, look, life, not every day is wonderful, and we still have problems in life. That's just is what it is. And we've had to come to terms with I think we talked about in the class, with the fact that we're going to die, that life is finite, because we were told that we would never die, that we would walk right into a paradise earth. So because of that, we have to live this life and also accept what the eventuality of it is. If there is something beyond this, and there is a loving God, and then he'll be able to know what's in our hearts and see that we didn't do anything just because we're awful people. If he sees us as awful people, so be it. Whatever, we're going to be the best people that we can be. And we are so much better people now that we are not in a judgmental cult that is so small, so insular, that where human beings farm out their minds to a hive and no longer think for themselves. It's awesome. I mean, what can you say about autonomy, independence, freedom? Freedom's never free. It came with the price. We lost our families, but oh well. I mean, I hate to sound callous. Oh well, because that's part of it, and we're not going to live our lives for other people. So,
Yeah.
Did you have something that you wanted to add? No?
I think we're good.
All right. All right. So that's our first batch of questions. If we get more questions, we'll do another video. And we really appreciated the opportunity to speak in an academic institution. We appreciated the ability to speak to you. It was a cool group to be able to talk to all of you and to have your questions and your engagement. We're not coming just to bash someone or anything like that. It's easy to take it that way, especially people become defensive a lot of times because they have deeply held beliefs and they don't like to look outside of that. That's not our intent. Our intent isn't to offend or to create faux outrage or real outrage. Our intent is to answer questions from the heart and truthfully, and in freedom, which we can do now. And so it feels really good for us to be able to do this. And we just want to put the truth out there and help people to understand how this stuff occurs and what goes into it. We're not alone. We're not the only ones who have lived this experience. If you doubt our story, go listen to the rest of the Shun podcast. We're on the Shun podcast channel. Go listen to the other podcasts and see what you hear. And listen to other groups as well. There's Amish represented, Mennonite, FLDS. Someone grew up in a racist family cult. There's these other groups that are represented. So it's not just us. It's not just Jehovah's Witnesses, and it's not just us as far as the ex-Jehovah's Witness community. There are so many people out there speaking out, and there's so much evidence being put out there of these things that are going on. So really, you can't deny it at a point, and if you do, well, that's just because you want to. Nothing we can do about that. There's none so blind as he who shall not see. We finally saw, and here we are today. So thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. And if there's more questions, we'll see you again. Thank you very much. Bye.